In the late 19th century, a quiet transformation reshaped the modern economy. It did not begin with governments or wars, but with a single businessman who understood something deeper than profit. By the age of 31, a man operating out of Cleveland controlled only a small fraction of America's oil refining industry. Within a decade, that fraction became dominance, not influence, not leadership, control. His name was John D. Rockefeller. By the early 1900s, Rockefeller's enterprise handled the vast majority of oil refining, distribution, and sales in the United States. But his true achievement wasn't oil itself. It was the system he engineered. A repeatable method of control that would outlive him, outgrow Standard Oil, and quietly become the blueprint for corporate power well into the 21st century. That system still governs daily life today. Rockefeller didn't merely compete inside the market. He redesigned how markets function. He recognized that chaos, volatility, and competition created waste. His solution was consolidation, coordination, and control. In his view, efficiency wasn't just good business. It was moral. Born in 1839, Rockefeller grew up influenced by two opposing forces. His father lived by deception, selling fraudulent remedies and exploiting trust. His mother lived by rigid discipline, faith, and moral certainty. Rockefeller fused both worlds. He would act without mercy toward rivals while sincerely believing his actions served the greater good. When oil was discovered in Pennsylvania in 1859, thousands rushed to drill wells hoping for quick riches. Prices collapsed, then spiked. Fortunes evaporated overnight. Rockefeller watched carefully and saw what others missed. The money wasn't in drilling. Drilling depended on luck. The real power sat downstream, in refining. Refining transformed crude oil into kerosene, the fuel lighting homes across America. Unlike drilling, refining rewarded scale, precision, and cost control. Rockefeller invested early, and by his mid-20s, owned a refinery that outperformed most competitors in Cleveland. But Cleveland had dozens of refineries, all fighting for survival. Instead of undercutting prices temporarily, or chasing growth blindly, Rockefeller pursued something far more durable. He aimed to remove competition entirely. His solution was not innovation in product, but innovation in structure. He began integrating vertically, absorbing every step of production into his own control. Barrels, storage, transportation, shipping, and distribution were no longer independent businesses. They became internal components of one expanding machine. Each absorbed link lowered costs, increased leverage, and weakened rivals who still relied on external suppliers. This wasn't just efficiency, it was strategic domination. Competitors found themselves paying more for materials, transport, and storage, while Rockefeller operated at a fraction of their cost. He could sell at prices that others couldn't survive, and still remain profitable. By 1870, this approach had a name: Standard Oil. What began as a single refinery evolved into a framework that would reshape capitalism itself. Rockefeller wasn't building a company. He was building a system, one designed to grow, replicate, and endure. And this was only the beginning. Rockefeller understood that controlling costs was only half the battle. The next step was far more aggressive, removing rivals from the board entirely. Once Standard Oil achieved internal efficiency through vertical control, Rockefeller turned outward. This phase would define his reputation and establish the most feared tactic in American business history. The strategy was simple and brutal. Competitors were given a choice. They could sell their refineries to Standard Oil at a fair price and often retain a comfortable management position. Or they could refuse and face a price war they were mathematically guaranteed to lose. Rockefeller's operation could sell kerosene below cost for long periods because its integrated system absorbed the losses. Independent refiners could not. Every sale pushed them closer to insolvency. This approach reached its most infamous moment in the early 1870s. Over a short period, nearly every refinery owner in Cleveland was approached. Most accepted the offer. Those who resisted saw prices collapse, credit dry up, and customers disappear. Within months, nearly all refining capacity in the city belonged to Standard Oil. What had once been a crowded marketplace became a single command center. This process was repeated across the country. Standard Oil expanded into major refining hubs, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and beyond, using the same formula: acquire when possible, undercut when necessary, absorb what remains. By the end of the decade, Standard Oil no longer competed with rivals. It replaced them. By the late 1870s, the company controlled the overwhelming majority of America's refining capacity. This level of dominance created a new problem. The law had not been designed for corporations that spanned multiple states while operating as a unified force. Ownership rules restricted companies from holding assets beyond their home state. Yet Rockefeller's empire already crossed those boundaries. The solution was structural innovation. In the early 1880s, Rockefeller's legal team introduced a revolutionary concept: the corporate trust. Instead of directly owning every subsidiary, shareholders transferred their stock to a centralized trust. The trust exercised control. The individual companies remained legally separate, but decision-making was unified. This maneuver effectively bypassed existing laws while remaining technically compliant. The trust became the foundation of modern corporate organization. It separated ownership from operation and allowed control to scale nationally. Later generations would call this a holding company. Today, it is the standard model for global corporations. With this structure in place, Standard Oil reached its peak. It controlled nearly all refining-dominated distribution and dictated pricing. Rockefeller had achieved something unprecedented, near total command over a vital resource powering the industrial age. Public reaction was fierce. Journalists, politicians, and citizens began to push back. Investigative reports exposed secret transportation deals, discriminatory pricing, and systematic destruction of competition. The idea that one company could hold such power unsettled the nation. This pressure eventually led to legal action under new antitrust laws. In 1911, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil violated antitrust principles and ordered its dissolution into dozens of independent companies. To many, this looked like justice. In reality, it marked the system's evolution. Because Rockefeller retained ownership across the new entities, the breakup didn't destroy his influence, it multiplied it. Each successor company operated more efficiently on its own, and their combined value exceeded the original whole. The monopoly was officially dismantled, yet its power remained intact, distributed, and quietly stronger than before. The dismantling of Standard Oil was supposed to signal the end of monopolistic power. Instead, it proved something far more important. The structure could survive without the original company. What Rockefeller built was not dependent on oil, geography, or even a single corporation. It was a transferable blueprint, and other industries adopted it rapidly. The successor companies of Standard Oil quietly reassembled influence over time. Separate on paper, they dominated their regional markets. Decades later, many merged again, forming modern giants that still control global energy. The monopoly had not disappeared. It had simply changed shape. But oil was only the first proving ground. Other sectors learned quickly. Steel, railroads, banking, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and eventually technology all absorbed the same core principles. Control production vertically, absorb competitors horizontally, centralize ownership through holding structures, influence regulation to favor incumbents, and when public pressure grows too loud, reorganize without surrendering real power. In the modern era, this blueprint is everywhere. Retail giants no longer just sell products. They own logistics, data, payments, cloud infrastructure, and delivery networks. Search engines don't merely provide information, they control advertising markets, data flows, and access itself. Pharmaceutical firms don't just develop medicine, they influence approval processes, pricing frameworks, and research funding. The names have changed, but the architecture is unmistakable. Equally important was Rockefeller's final innovation, legitimacy through philanthropy. After becoming one of the most criticized figures in America, he shifted public perception by funding education, science, and medicine. Foundations replaced factories as the public face of wealth. Donations replaced debate. Influence moved quietly into institutions rather than markets. These foundations did more than give money away. They shaped priorities. They determined which research received funding, which models of education became standard, and which approaches to healthcare gained legitimacy. Over time, philanthropy became a parallel system of influence, one that operated beyond elections or competition. Modern billionaires follow this model almost precisely. Foundations today fund global health initiatives, educational reform, and public policy research. They reduce tax exposure, preserve legacy control, and extend influence across generations. What appears as generosity also functions as governance without accountability. This is not conspiracy, it is structure. The system works because it is efficient. Consolidation reduces redundancy. Scale lowers prices. Integration accelerates delivery. Consumers benefit from convenience, speed, and reliability. That is why resistance is difficult. The system delivers real value, while simultaneously concentrating wealth and power at unprecedented levels. Most people experience the benefits daily without seeing the cost. Markets that appear competitive are often controlled by a handful of entities. Choice exists within boundaries that are invisible but firm. Innovation happens, but only where it does not threaten the core structure. New entrants are acquired, neutralized, or priced out before they mature. Rockefeller understood this outcome over a century ago. Systems outperform individuals, structures outlast people. Once embedded into law, finance, and culture, they no longer need defenders. They perpetuate themselves. By the time Rockefeller died, the system was no longer his. It had become the default operating model of modern capitalism. And today, nearly every major industry still runs on it. What makes Rockefeller's legacy so enduring is not wealth, oil, or even monopoly. It is permanence. Other industrial giants built companies. Rockefeller built a framework that could survive court rulings, public outrage, and even its own destruction. When Standard Oil was dismantled, the system didn't collapse. It proved it could adapt. That adaptability is why the structure still defines modern life. Today, people believe they are choosing between competitors, but most choices exist within tightly controlled ecosystems. Energy, banking, technology, healthcare, retail. Each sector is dominated by a small number of powerful entities using the same structural logic. Ownership is centralized. Competition is managed. Regulation is shaped from within, and influence flows through institutions rather than markets. The system is not hidden because it is secret. It is hidden because it is normalized. You interact with it every day. You fuel your vehicle through companies descended from earlier consolidations. You shop through platforms that control supply chains end to end. You search, communicate, and store information inside digital infrastructures owned by a few corporations. You receive healthcare shaped by standards, research priorities, and licensing systems established decades ago. None of this feels coordinated, yet all of it follows the same architectural logic. This is not accidental. Rockefeller believed competition was inefficient and destructive. In his worldview, consolidation created order. That belief became embedded in corporate law, financial practice, and regulatory design. Over time, the system proved itself effective at delivering scale, consistency, and lower consumer prices. It also proved exceptionally effective at concentrating wealth and influence. Both outcomes exist simultaneously. This is why the system persists. It works. Attempts to dismantle it often strengthen it instead. Breaking companies into parts increases efficiency and shareholder value. Regulation increases barriers to entry, protecting incumbents. Public criticism leads to rebranding, restructuring, or philanthropic expansion, not structural change. Escaping the system is nearly impossible. Resisting it requires constant effort and sacrifice. Ignoring it guarantees participation without awareness. That leaves understanding. Understanding how the system works changes how you see markets, power, and choice. It reveals why dominance returns even after disruption, why industries consolidate instead of diversify, why innovation is absorbed rather than allowed to threaten incumbents, why wealth continues flowing upward regardless of political cycles. Rockefeller's greatest achievement was not becoming the richest individual of his era. It was proving that systems outlive people, and that, once a structure is efficient enough, it becomes inevitable. The modern economy is not broken. It is functioning exactly as designed. That design rewards scale, control, and permanence. It favors entities that can endure regulation, absorb competition, and influence the rules that govern them. Over time, those entities grow fewer, larger, and more deeply embedded. You live inside that design. Recognizing it does not mean rejecting it. It means seeing it clearly. The Rockefeller system is not a relic of history. It is the operating system of the present. And once you understand that, you begin to recognize the pattern everywhere. The company names change. The technology evolves. The structure remains. That is the legacy of John D. Rockefeller. Not oil, but a system that still defines how power, wealth, and control move through the modern world.